The One and Only Rumi is a picture book about the childhood of the man who would grow up to become the 13th-century poet Rumi. Recognized internationally, his poetry is still read today and offers a message of hope in troubled times. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and welcome to the Kids Bookshelf. Ahead, we'll explore the book, and I'll talk with the author about the inspiration behind it. Rabiah York is an award-winning author. Her previous picture books include The Conference of the Birds and The Gift of Ramadan, as well as the young adult novel No True Believers. She joins us to talk about The One and Only Rumi. Rabiah, welcome to the Kids Bookshelf.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Well, this is a picture book about Rumi, so tell us about what inspired you to create this book.
Well, Rumi is just a very impressive character. He was a prolific writer. He was a poet that wrote up to 6 volumes of poetry in his Mesnavi. And that equals, I think it's about 25,000 verses. I am not a poet. I enjoy poetry very much. I'm an English teacher. I teach poetry. So I'm just impressed by his entire body of work. But more than that, it's his overall message that is weaved through much of his poetry. And that is a message of finding, one, God within. Two, he has a timeless sort of universality in which he sees that, or says that God is found in all the different faiths and that they all point to the same truth. If you were to think of them as being different trees, they all come from the same soil. And I think that sort of timeless inclusion is something that speaks a lot to many people, including myself. And then I think the last reason is that he is someone who has or had endured a lot in his life. And he was still able to see the good in the world, and not only see the good, but to deal with pain and use that pain to push out a message that other people can respond to. So he's just inspiring. And I think that the more that one reads him, the more that you see that his message is something that transcends culture and transcends time.
So why a picture book? And I guess the other part is the question is how you became interested in his childhood and how that maybe impacted his writing as he grew up.
Well, I would have to say that so many people who are writers or artists or just excel in whatever area of life that they've become masters in, whether it's sports or anything else, they've often had usually some sort of trauma in their childhood and or a very supportive network, whether that was family or something else. And I said to myself, what was his childhood? Because he was a prolific writer and he has this message that has transcended time. I mean, he's from the 13th century. So why does he continue to speak to a modern American such as myself? And when I looked into his childhood, what I realized was that in his early youth, his family had to leave their home country. He was born in, I think it was 1207 in what we call modern day Afghanistan. The Mongol invasion was happening. And his family was a family of means. And so they were able to gather their belongings and leave. And they eventually settled in Turkey. And I myself have moved many times. I was a military brat. I lived overseas with my kids later in life as an adult. I repatriated recently. And I know that moving is challenging enough on a kid, let alone moving in a way in which you are literally being uprooted. And in his case, this term didn't exist at that time, but he was essentially a refugee. And to have experienced all of that and to have become who he is with this message that sees the good in all people. There had to have been this force as a young child to help him heal and to help him be that person as a man. And even though my picture book, the words and the dialogue between him and his dad, that's all coming from my imagination. And we don't have a lot of details about his childhood. I believe he had to have had a very strong family in order to have endured all that and become the person that he became. So I think that's a message that all children, and especially children's books, they are that genre that, they're for ages 4, but everyone from 104 enjoy picture books. They have this magic to them that, speak to the adult, the child and the adult, and then the child. And I think that's what's really magical about picture books and why I've always loved writing picture books. And his story is just, it's one of those things that I said, he must have had such a beautiful family. And I know in my life, my ability to overcome any difficulties is because I have had a safety net of a wonderful family. So I wanted to capture that in a book that celebrated family and culture and faith and starting over and all those things that are part of many people's lives.
Would you read the first couple of pages for us to give us a taste of what people are going to find here?
Sure, I'd be happy to. All right. The One and Only Rumi. And I have to just say, the illustrations, I'm not an illustrator, but the illustrations by Manelli Manicherry, I believe that's how you say her last name, are just beautiful. She did a magical job. Every morning, Muhammad climbed to his roof and listened to the beautiful sound of the birds as they greeted the sun. The quieter you become, he thought, the more you are able to hear. The sound of his father's flute always brought Muhammad joy. He and his friends would always stop and listen whenever his father played. The notes were as soft and sweet as a gentle rain. Be like the flute and the birds, his father would often say. Through happy days and bad, they keep on singing.
I'm talking with Rabiah York about the One and Only Rumi, and our conversation will continue. If you're enjoying this discussion, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. And thank you. Why was it important to you to introduce Muhammad, later known as Rumi, to children at such a young age?
Honestly, because to be a child, even if you have never left your hometown, even if you've never dealt with anything really difficult like he did, is to be in a constant state of change, right? Every phase of being a child, you're growing and you're facing new challenges and new difficulties. And being a child is, in that way, is very stressful because you have these really big emotions. And it takes children and teens and young adults a long time to learn how to process and understand their own emotions. And so part of this book is really centering on him as a child and dealing with feelings that are real and feelings that cause him to be angry and learning how to live with that and channel that into something I guess you could say more productive.
Now, part of the message I got from this book is about thriving in adversity. Here's this child that was forced to move. Genghis Khan is, moving in on them. They have to leave. And yet his father, talks to him through his music, but also explains to him that, you can make friends in new places. And the birds, the flowers, the plants, the people, there are those where you're going to go to, and you can make new friends and form new bonds, even though you're leaving a place that you've loved.
Absolutely. That's a very important message in this book. It's always, finding the helpers, and they are always present. I know for myself, having lived in many different places, birds were always something that's a staple. Even if you're in an inner city, there's always pigeons. So there's always something that you can use to find friendship in. Absolutely.
And you were able to use some of his phrases from his poetry and include them in this book. What are some of the examples of the ways you've done that?
One example is in the Symbolism. So his poetry begins with discussing the symbolism of the ney, which is an old, like a flute, essentially. And I use that, to use a very fancy term that I only learned about when I did my MFA. I use that as sort of an extended metaphor or objective correlative. And so when he has to leave his hometown, they stop along the way, and he's angry. He pulls this reed, or essentially a stick, out of the water, and he's hitting with it. And his dad doesn't tell him to leave it or to stop, but he's like, let's take that with us. And eventually he keeps the reed. And thanks to his father's guidance, he's like, why don't we turn this into a flute? Because that's what the traditional reed hollowed out can become a flute. It can also become a pen. And so the traditional pen comes from the reed. And so it's taking that pain and turning it into something more beautiful. So there's the symbolism that comes very much from Rumi's book that's in the picture book as well. Be like the sun, just, a simple simile. But, the sun is something, again, no matter where you are, it's going to come up every day, and it's going to remind you that there's another day. There's a new beginning each day. So be like the sun, that comes from Rumi's poetry. Houses and churches and temples, or in mosques, as special as they are, the most special place to find God is within. So that is incorporated as well. And then the idea that what you lose always comes back to you again. And that ties back to this idea of the reed, and his reed becomes something that he makes music out of, and then he eventually gives it away in the picture book as a cane, and then his father gives him his reed. So it's this idea, and Rumi speaks a lot about this in his own poetry, that don't grieve what you've lost, because loss will come back to you, whether it's just perspective, which is a wonderful thing to have, or friendship, however that is found.
What is it you like about writing for this age group?
Oh my goodness. I suppose the first thing is it allows me to be to get in touch with my child and my love of picture books. Picture books, they have all the good elements of fiction that any long novel is going to have. It just has it in a confined space that you can sit in a quiet, intimate moment. I still read them just as an adult. I was just on a vacation with my teenage daughters, and we found at one of these free libraries that people put inside their homes, the Pout Pout Fish, and we took it and we read it. So it's one of those things where picture books just are timeless, and it's something that it brings together multiple generations, and I think that is why they are just special for all families, right? A picture book is something that you pass on as a grandmother to your grandchildren. So it's that togetherness that comes out of picture book, and you don't get that same experience with other genres.
Well, you've written several picture books. What's next for you?
Great question. I'm actually trying something I've never done, which is to write exclusively for adults. And I am writing my memoir. So that's it's very, very different for me. I'm going beyond 1,000 words to a much longer format. I feel like I've gone from having a wonderful time in a safe pool to an ocean.
The book is The One and Only Rumi by Rabiah York. Rabiah, thank you for talking with me today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on your show.
If you would like to purchase The One and Only Rumi, I've placed a link for you in the description below. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. Meanwhile, here are 2 more books you might find interesting. Well, thank you for watching this edition of the Kids Bookshelf. I'm Dan Skinner. Until next time, keep sharing the gift of reading.